Welcome back to Your Cup of Counsel. On this episode, we're talking all things trial. Do TV shows like Law and Order and Matlock have it right? Or is the trial experience completely different than what they show you on TV? We're drinking Zephyr coffee out of Menlo Park, and we are diving into what maybe you don't know happens behind the scenes in trial. Like, share, subscribe, follow us on all the channels, and let us know in the comments what you want to hear on the next episode.
Andje.
Tamara.
This episode, we thought we would share some stories of our own trials, but mostly just explain trial in a way that allows people to see that it is not like the TV shows. That's really the goal here, because it's not at all. And there's a lot that happens in TV that is compressed into a little timeline and only certain parts are shown. So anyway, that's the whole point of this episode. You've been to trial recently. What are some things that you think people get wrong about how trial actually works?
I think that a lot of people think there's a lot of glamour behind trial, number one, and it is not a glamorous experience from the trial lawyer perspective. It's pretty frequent to get less than 5 hours of sleep every trial night because you get out of court at 5, you commute to wherever you're working, you try and get some protein in your system. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. You're prepping your witnesses for the next day. You're trying to figure out what documents you need to get into evidence. Make sure you have your blow-ups. Your blow-ups look great. So by the time you go to bed, it's midnight, 1, sometimes 2, and then you got to get up, make sure your hair is washed, your suit is crisp, and do it all over again. So we're running on fumes, a lot of caffeine, not enough protein, and trying to make it look all polished and put together. And that is a physical and emotional and mentally draining exercise as a trial lawyer, for sure.
Yeah.
It's also exciting. I mean, don't get me wrong. We do it because we love it and we're running on adrenaline that keeps us going. But I think the general public doesn't realize how exhausting it is behind the scenes, for sure.
Yeah. And the multiple different things you have to be thinking about all the time, I think is another hard part for the mental load, right? Because it's not just how am I going to present this story in a way that's persuasive to a group of strangers, which is one thing all in itself, but also how am I going to make sure that I'm abiding by the judge's orders, for example, because before every trial starts, there's orders from the judge about what evidence can come in and what evidence can't come in. And so when you're preparing a witness who's a human about how to testify, you have to be really careful that their answers aren't going to, violate one of the court orders, or if there's certain documents that you absolutely need to get into evidence because it's a critical part of your case, you have to make sure that those are going to get in. You sometimes in the middle of a trial, you'll start thinking about, well, what if this case is appealed? How am I preserving certain things in the trial to make sure that we win on appeal, right? So there's constantly all these different streams of thought all at the same time.
Mental gymnastics.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that I think is a big misconception is, or just something people don't recognize is really challenging, is fitting the right amount of witnesses in per day and scheduling them appropriately, right? So what happens is, let's say you have 10 witnesses that you want to present in your case, right? Oftentimes they all have their own availability of when they're available. And you aren't exactly sure how much time each witness is going to take to put on the stand, because it's not just you asking them questions, it's the other side that is going to be cross-examining your witnesses as well. So I might know, okay, I'm going to need about an hour with this witness. That's already hard enough to estimate because some people are extremely long-winded and will just talk and talk and talk and talk, and you get to ask 2 questions and they're talking forever, right?
Well, and people get nervous.
Yes.
So I always say there's the trial you plan and then the trial you have.
Yes.
Because the testimony never turns out the same.
Yes.
And whatever your plan was for any particular witness, it's not going to be executed the way that you had imagined.
Yes, for better or for worse, right? Sometimes it's better than you expected and sometimes it's absolutely not. But the scheduling, so you've constantly, you've told a witness that they have to be there on a Tuesday to be able to testify, and then they might wait in the court outside the courthouse for the whole day because you just don't get to them, and maybe they're not available the next day. So there's the whole juggling thing that happens just with witness availability on its own, right?
Definitely.
And oftentimes judges will put time limits on how much how much time overall or how many days or hours each side gets. And if you're also trying to comply with that, you're thinking, do I absolutely need this witness? Should I pick a witness that's a bit more important to come in? Are they available? All of that.
Yeah.
It ends up just being very challenging. It can be very challenging.
And then there's strategy decisions that you're making
Right.
throughout trial. So you're trying to watch the jury, gauge their interest. Is this point hitting home? Are they bored out of their mind? If I'm calling another damage witness on the same topic, are they falling asleep? Maybe I don't call the next witness. I dismiss them and send them home and move on to the next topic because they've clearly gotten it and I'm beating a dead horse now.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is like flexibility to pivot and maybe don't call people that you anticipated calling in your case.
Yep. And yeah, and you don't ever want to waste the jury's time either, right? So or gild the lily. Like you could call 5 witnesses on one topic, but nobody wants to do that because
Yeah.
we always want to be respectful of the jury's time. We've talked in other episodes about how important it is to sit on a jury trial, and the last thing we ever want to do is make people sit in that chair for longer than they have to because they're taking time away from their jobs to sit there, right?
Right.
So that's obviously another consideration. I think the lack of glamour is such a huge part of it. I don't know how many people think that it's super glamorous. I think some people probably do, but it is really, really hard and it takes a huge toll on your mental health and physical health. And, sometimes if trials go on for weeks and they're in different locations and you're staying at a hotel, at whatever hotel you can find, for days and weeks at a time without access to the best food usually. You're getting something quick. You're not going to the gym usually. I mean, I always try so hard to prioritize wellness as much as you possibly can. Someone told me once that if you have one out of the three basic things, then you're doing pretty well, which is sleep, food, or exercise.
Hmm.
It's probably unrealistic in a trial to get all three, but if every day you can get one of those three things dialed in, then you're doing pretty well.
Oh,
So,
that's great. That's a
right?
good mental checklist. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to note that for my next trial.
So let's say there's no way you can get sleep one night, at least try to make your diet okay. If you can't get any exercise, at least make sure you're getting sleep, right? But if you don't have all three, it's a problem. Obviously, if you've got all three dialed in, you're off to the races.
I don't know. At least in our cases, I can't imagine ever getting all three in one day.
No, I
That
mean,
seems unachievable.
you're not stressed out enough.
Yeah.
You're not working hard enough
Exactly.
if you're able to get all three.
What about like Matlock moments and surprise witnesses? Does that ever really happen? Does like the defense call some witness that you had never heard of and they come parading in and it's like audible gasping in the courtroom?
No, not really. So usually both sides exchange a witness list that has all the possible witnesses that they could call. You generally know the witnesses that the other side is going to call. They are allowed to call impeachment witnesses randomly if they want to, which would be if a witness says something that the other side or one side wants to prove is a lie, they can bring in a different witness and have that witness testify. But usually, most of the time, things are pretty locked in by the
Mhm.
time of trial. But there's totally surprises. I mean, in the trial that I just did, we had a witness cry on the stand, had no idea that she was going to do that. She became ultra emotional. It was a very difficult piece of testimony for her, but it was, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in the whole courtroom. It was
Mhm.
a really and a very important moment for our case. And we had no idea how she was going to testify or that it was that raw for her. So yeah, surprises happen, but in terms of witness selection, I haven't been totally shocked before, but have you?
Yeah.
You tell me.
No, not really. Same. I have actually called in rebuttal. I don't want to say a surprise witness because it was somebody that was known and disclosed in the litigation, but I don't think the defense anticipated me actually locating this person and putting them on the stand.
Wow.
So that was kind of an exciting moment. I called in a city inspector who had inspected a staircase and wrote numerous violations before there was an ultimate stair failure and somebody was horribly injured. And so we were in trial, and I found the city inspector and called him to come testify to his findings. And the defense, you could see, was like shifting and scrambling. And it was the most perfect testimony. And I
Wow.
subpoenaed him. So I didn't have access to him before. I had never spoken to him. You always kind of want to know what your witnesses are going to say. There's a little bit of a risk in putting on somebody that you've never interacted with because you don't know if they're going to be favorable or not.
Mhm.
But based on his report, I felt like if he doesn't deviate from his report, it can't really go too poorly. And he got up and I showed him a photo of the stairs in the condition right before they had collapsed and asked him what his thoughts were on the stairs. And it could not have been scripted better. He said, "That's a bad run of stairs." And I was like, "No further questions." Brilliant. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing, and just so that everyone knows, that was in your rebuttal case.
Yeah.
So that's after both sides have presented their evidence, the defendant has just presented their evidence,
Right.
and you get to come back and
Kind of get the last word.
get the last word, which
Yeah.
is so brilliant. That's a
Yeah.
great. There's a principle that that we think about in the trial lawyer world for everyone that's listening, called primacy and recency, right? You always want the first thing somebody hears is the sort of the most persuasive, that's what sticks in their head, or the last thing they hear. So you had the recency, right? That was the
Mhm.
most recent thing that they heard before they went into the deliberation room, which is such a
Yeah.
great thing.
I actually love rebuttal. I use rebuttal a lot, and I don't know that that is something that's necessarily utilized, and it can be
Mhm.
expensive, and so sometimes that factors in. But I had another trial where I had a fire cause expert come in and testify in my case in chief. The defense fire expert came in, and it was an apartment fire, and it was an electrical fire, and we were trying to establish that it was caused by an electrical failure, and the defense said it wasn't. It was an issue unrelated to the building, of course. And so the defense expert got on the stand and essentially changed his opinion on the fly, which you're not allowed to do. So, over my objection that this is new evidence, this wasn't disclosed in the litigation, the judge overruled my objection, and this witness was allowed to put on all these new theories, which was pretty shocking in the moment. And so I had to call my fire cause expert back a second time, and he was from out of town. So I had to have him travel in. It's a very costly exercise. But I then in real time got to say, okay, the defense expert, you read his deposition. He said one thing, and then he came to trial and said something completely different. So can you tell the jury, like, why the second thing that he's saying is also wrong? Because you've already explained why the first thing is wrong. And then my expert had to go over, all the reasons that he was wrong, but they just lost so much credibility. And
Right.
I think that they didn't anticipate that I would go through the time and expense of calling him back, which I did, and I got the last word on it. And so it was great, and we ended up prevailing on the case.
Hmm.
But rebuttal, I think, can be somewhat of a Matlock moment where some magic can really happen at trial.
Yeah, because you have the ability to address things that came up that were new, basically,
Correct.
right? That's the
Yes.
whole theory
Yes,
behind rebuttal.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who are really interested in trial, because there are some nerds out there like us who are not lawyers, but who are still into the whole trial thing, can anyone come and watch a trial?
Yeah. Trials are open to the public, as are depositions, but I can't imagine anyone wants to sit in on a deposition. But trials are open. So if you ever wanted to just like pop into a courthouse and sit in the, galley and watch trial lawyers in action, you are free to do that. I also encourage people to come support their trial lawyer friends because it's pretty fun to see your friends in action, and it's energizing from the attorney side to like have a packed courtroom when you're crossing a really important witness. You kind of get the energy from, it's almost like a sporting event, right? Like if you have an audience show up, there's more on the line and you perform better. So same is true for trial settings. And I do
Mhm.
have friends that will show up and support me at trial, which is really cool.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's a fun thing. So for people who want to join, I think the thing to do would be to look at the superior court in your county, and look at the civil trial department is usually what it's called, right? And then you can see there's a calendar listed publicly, and you can see um, what trials are happening in the next little while, and then you can just go and sit. And it's any type of civil trial that happens, right? There's business disputes, there's personal injury cases, there's employment cases, all kinds of things
Yeah.
that you can go and watch.
Yeah.
And you can see,
Definitely.
and you will also see the biggest thing you'll probably see is the difference between TV and real life is a lot more boring.
Right.
And I often get like I get this sense from the jury at like when they first sit down and they see the first few witnesses, it's a little bit of like an underwhelming moment because I think they're like,
Don't
oh,
say that. Don't
this
say that.
but you know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
think people come in thinking it's going to be like bang, 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 excitement, excitement, all of this stuff that happen, like really, breathtaking evidence that's super interesting and
Mhm.
exciting. And it's pretty slow moving. And the
Yeah.
questions are slow moving. And you kind of get into the cadence. And obviously, I think, like with anything, the jurors that have sat in trial end up becoming extremely interested in the case and very interested in the outcome, obviously. But in the beginning, it takes a little bit of getting used to because TV just makes things look so much faster and more
Right.
exciting.
But there's also that element of pressure on us as trial performers, because that's what we
Yep.
are, to make it interesting. And so
Mhm.
trying to use mixed media, like do you use a PowerPoint in opening? Do you
Mhm.
show videos in opening? Do you just call witnesses back to back? Or do you play videos of some witnesses and call some witnesses live to kind of break up the in person versus video?
Yep.
So you want to make sure that the jury feels like you're putting on the best performance that you can and you're presenting the evidence in the most interesting way that you can. Otherwise, it can get quite boring.
Yes, agreed. Yes, and people have low attention spans these days,
Yeah.
right? That's and for everyone that maybe doesn't know, when Andje refers to opening, that's the first thing that the lawyers get to tell, the first long form thing that the lawyers get to tell the jury about what the case is about. And so, some courtrooms have very low tech, and it's really hard to do a PowerPoint or anything like nice and pretty. Some courtrooms you just have to write on a big piece of paper what you're doing if you
Hmm.
want to show any kind of like visual. Some judges don't let you do or let you do minimal visuals, right? So you're sometimes limited by those types of things, but yeah, we try our best to make things as interesting as possible. And I try to do openings, like short openings if I can, depending on the complexity of the case, because I just think people zone out. I mean, I know I do. If I'm listening to someone talk for an hour,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm zoning in and out.
Yeah. I think you always want to keep opening to under an hour, and extreme scenarios, maybe that there's an outlier, but always under an hour if you can. And then the other thing that I think our viewers may not know, that's important to know if you do get picked on a jury, is that opening statement cannot be argumentative. So it's just factual statements about
Mhm.
what you believe the evidence will show. So sometimes you hear an opening statement and you're thinking, oh, that wasn't super compelling, or like, it just didn't have a lot of meat behind it. It's because the attorneys haven't been able to start their argument phase yet.
They're
So
not
they're
allowed.
not able to piece everything together for you. They're just
Mhm.
kind of giving you a roadmap of this is what you're going to see. And then the judge is going to give you the law, and then they get the evidence in the trial. And then in closing, the attorney gets to stand back up and say, okay, this is what you saw. This is why it matters. And this is how you put it all together.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that's really important.
Yep.
One of the questions that somebody had asked is, what are experts? We talk a lot about experts. So what
Mhm.
is an expert? How do you use them? Why are they important?
Yes. Yeah, it's a good question. So we hire experts to explain an area of the law or an area of the case, a factual area of the case, or a piece of science in the case, or some aspect of the case that is not like commonly known by most normal, lay people, most jurors. Um, and so on the employment side, sometimes we'll use experts to calculate damages. So if I have a client who has worked at a company that has stock options as part of their compensation, and we have to say to the jury, if this person were not wrongfully terminated and they would have continued working at the company, here's how the value of their stock would look over time at this particular company based on what we know about stock values now, et cetera. That's sort of a complicated exercise and requires a lot of like mental doing. So we have a forensic accountant come in or a stock valuation expert to come in and explain that aspect of it. Sometimes we'll have an expert, like either a treating physician or an expert who will kind of swoop into the litigation and opine on emotional distress of my client. Those are the two most common experts in the employment side. Sometimes other types of experts, like HR experts, will come in to talk about policies that the employer should have had or not had. We had an expert in my recent trial who talked about how who would have talked. He didn't end up testifying at trial, but he would have talked about how promotions in the police industry happen. So sometimes industry experts to educate the jury about that kind of thing. So, but yeah, generally it's and you have to meet a certain legal threshold, a legal test to be qualified as an expert. You can't just have anybody come in and talk about anything. But those are the most uncommon ones. What about you?
Yeah, I
What do you
think
use?
most of my experts tend to be on the technical, medical side, science side, accident reconstructionist. So if I'm in a car accident case or a product failure case, experts will come in and say what went wrong with the product. And sometimes they'll do an animation or a simulation to actually show the jury, because there's not a video of the accident. They'll recreate it into like an animation form so that they can play. Here's what happened in the collision. Here's how the vehicles were
Mhm.
aligned. And that is to assist the jury in ultimately determining who's at fault, who ran the red,
Mhm.
who was speeding. what part of the product failed and why the failure was catastrophic or, something. And then I have medical experts that come in a lot of times and talk about injury causation. So I do a lot of construction site accident cases. I have a lot of workers in their, late 40s, early 50s. They're in a heavy, exhausting work environment. They're concrete guys or framer guys. And so a lot of them have back, neck pain just from years of hard labor. Then they're in a car accident and something is made worse. Well, I have to put on medical experts to say why this is different or a worsening of symptoms from some underlying condition that they may have had before.
Mhm.
And that's all really important in helping the jury understand how to do their job, which is when they get to the verdict form, deciding was this injury caused by this event? Who's responsible for this event? And so we
Mhm.
give them expert testimony so that they have enough information to make those very important decisions.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And just so everyone knows, if you already have a pre-existing injury and something like a car accident or an accident at work happens that you have to go to Andje and ask her to represent you, and that accident exacerbated or made worse your pre-existing injury, that defendant is still liable for the amount that it was made worse,
Right.
right? So just because you have a bad back doesn't mean that you still shouldn't be compensated for the harm that the accident caused, right? So I just wanted to make
Absolutely.
that clear.
Yeah.
Um, so one question that we get, which is kind of a funny one, but fair. How different is a lawyer's trial persona from their real life persona? When you go into the
Ooh.
jury room, into the trial, into the courtroom, is it all an act? Do we act? Are we actors in this thing that we call the jury trial, right? Because we call it like a cinematography
Right.
experiment. Um, I don't think I'm all that much different. I think I'm pretty authentic in trial. But I don't know, maybe I'll have to ask jurors about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel
Well,
like
I don't
I'm
think a juror would know, right? Because
that's true.
they only know your trial persona.
That's
So
true.
I think friends and family that come see you in trial could give you that input.
Yeah, friends
So,
and family, write in, tell me.
right, how am I doing?
Tell
Is it
me.
me? Is it trial
Is it
Tamara? Is
Sasha
it
Fierce?
real life Tamara? Yeah,
The Sasha Fierce of my trial
right.
life?
I think for me, I try and be my authentic self, which is just like my normal personality, really approachable, try and break things down, really genuine, because I think juries can sniff out phony.
Yeah.
And if you're phony or trying to, I mean, we're plaintiffs lawyers, right? So plaintiffs lawyers tend to get a bad rap. We're in here trying to ask for bags of money. It's all show, it's all money. We're not here to help people, et cetera, et cetera. So we already come in kind of with this sleaze factor to us. And if you're not authentic and genuine, then that just kind of makes that worse.
Yeah.
And I think the jury, then you fall out of favor with the jury.
Yeah.
If you come in and you're talking to them like humans and you're talking about real life damages and you're giving them the facts and giving it to them straight, then I think you get credibility
Mhm.
and then they're more likely to come along with you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also think there's this other thing that I've seen some lawyers do, which isn't I mean, it's sort of in the same vein of using a lot of like legal speak or wanting to sound like a lawyer because I think it makes them I don't know if it's an insecurity thing, it makes them feel more lawyerly and like they're doing a better job or something. Um but I don't think that's effective at all. Like I'm like you. I think breaking things down in ways that people can understand because we're in the business of again making strangers understand totally unknown things up to that point for them, right? They don't know our client. They don't know the damages that our client has gone through. They don't know what's happened in the case. They need to know the story. And so, if we're adding a bunch of words that don't make sense and talking like we're lawyers, like we're not doing a good job
Right.
of making people understand what
Right.
happened, right?
Now, sometimes we're constrained to certain legal terms that are on jury instructions, which can
True.
make it hard
Yes.
because there's some phrases that sound very unnatural, but I know it's going to come up on the verdict form, and I need to make sure that I'm saying it in trial so
Yeah.
that when we get to the verdict form, they're like, I don't know if this is a substantial factor or not. I've never
Yeah.
heard that phrase before.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you do have to educate them on some legalese, but for the most part, I agree. Keep it casual, keep it direct, keep it
Mhm.
digestible, and that's the way to keep the jury with you.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay. What coffee are we drinking today? Let me look. This is Zephyr Espresso Blend. So I actually got this in Menlo Park. I live on the peninsula. I'm not lucky enough to live in San Francisco yet, maybe one day. And the field notes are milk chocolate, cherry, and vanilla. I got this from Coffee Bar in Menlo Park. And I'll just read this one description to you because it's so lovely. Like the west winds that blow over the Sierra Nevada mountains, our espresso blend will propel you throughout the day. It's
I
got some
love that.
lovely art on it. Yeah, I'm a fan.
I
What do
thought
you
it was
think of
I
this?
thought it was a great strong drink too.
Yeah,
It's definitely got the espresso kick for sure.
we like strength around here.
We loved it. Cheers.
Cheers.